Hey, it's Drybear. Just a few days ago, we received news on Fantastic's upcoming MMO survival game The Day Before that has a lot of people's undies in a bunch. So in case you're not caught up on the roller coaster ride that has been The Day Before, today we'll be going through a brief recap on what brought us to the disappointing news last week. Pay close attention to the timeline, dates, and especially the public communications, as these will be important later. The date is January 29th, 2021, and developer Fantastic has announced a brand new game by showing off a 5-minute trailer for The Day Before. And it looked awesome. It garnered a ton of attention from gamers, hopeful that the game will be a huge hit. The graphics looked great, the gameplay was clean, and it seemed to be a fully open world, post-apocalyptic zombie survival game. It truly appeared like the repeatable gameplay loop of games like The Division was blended with the gritty and realistic vibes of The Last of Us in a stunning mixture. Along with this rad trailer, Fantastic promised a, quote, real breakthrough for the MMO survival genre, end quote. By the end of spring 2021, we had been shown deep dives into vehicle mechanics and more extended trailers. And with our audience sufficiently excited that at this point Fantastic had gone silent, presumably to put nose to the grindstone to push the game to the finish line. After being quiet the entire summer, Fantastic returned in the fall of 2021 to announce that the game would be released June 21st, 2022, the following year. Exciting news for fans of the game that had spent all of 2021 with building anticipation for the game to finally come out. But Fantastic had another surprise in store for its fans, as they then announced another new title dubbed Prop Night, an asymmetrical PvP game that combined the playstyle of Prop Hunt and games like Dead by Daylight. I myself actually have 300 hours logged in Prop Night and had a blast playing it. And while Prop Night was met with critical acclaim, it struggled with building a substantial player base, peaking at just under 5,000 concurrent players on Steam with its November 2021 launch. Firmly believing in their product though, Fantastic put all hands on deck to tinker with the core gameplay of Prop Night to see if it could grow to greater heights. They even went as far as launching a redesign of the overall art direction of Prop Night for a second launch of the game. And it was at this time that things started to go downhill for The Day Before. Just under 6 weeks before the June 21st, 2022 release date, Fantastic announced that they were once again delaying the game so that they could move the game into Unreal Engine 5, promising a huge upgrade to quality and presentation. It was promised that the game would be done with this conversion and ready to release on March 1st, 2023, earlier this year. And while many players were upset by this big delay, some PC players remained hopeful and began upgrading their rigs in anticipation of the shiny new game. Hoping to reignite the growing community, Fantastic began once again posting trailers for their game, but another narrative was spreading instead. See, the public, who was now taking an interest in the inner workings of this developer, shined the spotlight on what Fantastic called their volunteering culture, which is what they refer to as their employees and staff. Grouped into two categories, there are full-time volunteers who were paid for their work and part-time volunteers that were wholly unpaid. The unpaid workers would, quote, get cool rewards, participation certificates, and free codes, end quote, as well as opportunities to test internal games. Remember that last part for later. So while they referred to all of their staff as volunteers, it was the part-time volunteers that were truly, in essence, volunteers, as they weren't being compensated for their time in real currency. After announcing the delay to The Day Before, Fantastic focused on Prop Night and fell silent on their MMO survival game through the rest of 2022. By the start of 2023, tensions had started to reach a fever pitch in the community. The Day Before had spent from January 2021 through the end of 2022 as one of the most wishlisted games on Steam, only to suddenly get removed entirely from the platform due to a copyright dispute. The name The Day Before had already been claimed by a mobile app developer that had published an app by the same name over a decade prior. Once removed from Steam, Fantastic announced a new release date for the game, pushing it back to November 10th, 2023. We all thought that the delay in the release was to fight their legal battle. However, Fantastic admitted in interviews that they had planned to delay the game even before the trademark dispute was filed. Their public stance was that they wanted to take more time to better prepare for the release and make overall improvements, polishes, optimizations, and added content. This new November release date was nearly 2 years after the game was initially revealed, and at this point fans had gone well past the point of simple frustration. Every major messaging board for discussion had devolved into rioting and outrage. Speculation circulated about whether the day before was just a scam to get people's money, or if the developers had bitten off more than they could chew with this particular project. Fantastic came out in front of the brawl to reaffirm that the game was not a scam, that development was still proceeding, and that it will release November 10th no matter what. To support this confident stance, a brand new extended gameplay trailer was released, hoping fans of the game would have their fears and anxieties squelched, at least for the time being. But then the ripoff accusations started pouring in. Now, my stance on this is rather neutral. Ultimately, most of the copycat comparisons were looking entirely at marketing materials and had little to nothing to do with the actual game itself, which seems like a case of untrustworthy outsourcing for the materials they made, or the failing of a single department rather than the game product. And especially when it comes to marketing materials, I can tell you from personal experience that this happens all the time. Nonetheless, the comparisons were hard to ignore. The gameplay trailer they posted in February of this year showed striking resemblance to the same composition, storyboarding, and sequencing of a Call of Duty trailer that had been released in the past, with many people comparing the marketing style of the day before to The Last of Us, a game that Fantastic had already said was a big inspiration for their work. Now we're in April 2023, where Fantastic announces that a public beta test for the game was on the way and confirmed for the second time that no more delays would be coming. The game, without fail, will be releasing on November 10th, 2023. Or maybe not. Last week, on November 1st, Fantastic announced another delay where the day before would now release on December 7th, 2023. Not only that, but now it will only be releasing on PC and no other platforms. This single release was now going to be a Steam early access and not a full release either, which meant that not only was the previously expected PlayStation and Xbox releases delayed, they were now completely unconfirmed. Fantastic posted a statement that, quote, "The full version release will happen once we are certain this is the best version of the game possible, and we believe that player feedback and involvement will greatly contribute to achieving this goal," end quote. Following the announcement of another delay, it was revealed that the promised public beta will take place. However, it will only be available to volunteers at Fantastic, which you will remember are the staff and external contractors of the studio. It would be anything but a public beta. As it stands now, players on PC dubiously expect to be able to try out the Steam early access version of the game on December 7th, a month from now. The early access version will be marked at $39 US, while the full release game will be $49 US whenever that time comes around. And there you have it, the twisted timeline that is the day before, leading up to and including the announcements last week. But let me know what you think down below in the comments. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.